My name is Mark DeVito. I started restoring antique furniture when I was a kid, working with my dad, who was once foreman in the Erskine and Danforth plant in Stamford, where European craftsmen made over 1,200 reproductions of furniture. Over the next 40 years, I've been restoring antiquities, artwork, furniture, furnishings, gold leaf frames, refinishing, restoring furniture, and currently I'm working on a TV show called Flea Market Flip with the host Lara Spencer. The project in this film today is this cherry drop lid desk. It's an American-made piece, made probably 1830 to 1860, and it is in all types of disrepair, and the existing finish is dried, cracked, darkened, and it is in just terrible shape. I'm going to show you how to strip and refinish this in a way that it looks like a nice antique that's been kept in good condition over the years. You see on the inside of this lid, it's been stained with a very heavy dark red stain, which is going to have to be removed. This is the backboards taken off the back of the desk. The first thing you do before you want to strip it. And these are the pigeonholes. This area is made of vertical and horizontal boards that are held together in grooves and slid in from the back. It creates the pigeonhole area when you sit at the desk. These are all taken out with the lid. Here they are set aside. And this draw, those two dots on each side, show that the hardware has been changed from the original wooden knob to a brass knob, but it had a wooden knob with a threaded wooden shaft that looks like this. These have been replaced and glued into the drawers, so they're stuck in there and can't remove them. The desk is now covered with a paste remover. This is a gel, it's a stripper. You put it on one section at a time. You let it sit there until it starts to eat the finish. You don't want it to dry out. It starts to dry, apply more remover on it until it starts to eat the finish. Once it's off, I like to clean it down, scrubbing it with a little heavier steel wool and some fine cotton cloths with a lacquer thinner. You can use a acetone if you want, or an alcohol. I prefer the lacquer thinner, and I like to clean it very well, right down to the grain, as clean as possible, and then dry it off well. This will prevent heavier sanding that we don't want to do, because I want to save the patina in the wood, which is that color that the sun has penetrated into the wood over all the years. We don't want to sand that out. And we see that the front left leg is completely broken off. There it is there. The left side, the left corner block is missing. This drawer has a large chip on it on one side. This right front leg is loose. It's going to have to be opened up to be repaired. There are cracked knobs like this in about 4 places. And the sides of the chest have splits on them where the seams of the boards were put together. This door, the fan inlay, half of it is missing. First thing I like to do is to remove all traces of the old glue from all the parts. I use a little Dremel tool and a chisel and a file, anything to get in there to remove all the old glue. Opening up the front right leg with my little pinch bar, and now I'm making these thin, long, tapered wedges out of cherry wood. The splits on the side are first going to be filled with a glue, rubbed into the splits, cleaned off well, and I'm tapping in these cherry wedges into the splits with my hammer. After the wedges are dried, you can see these legs that were glued with these little spring clamps made out of upholstery springs. Once these wedges are dried, I'm cutting them off with this saw I have, and then I'm going to get a nice sharp chisel and carefully plane the wedges flat to the surface. The chipped knob, I first cut a piece of cherry, and I glue and clamp it into position. Make sure it's a nice tight fit. Then, using my Dremel tool and some hand tools, I shape the knob and sand it into shape. The little sunburst, I'm making the pieces that are missing out of satin wood and they're cut into little pizza slice shapes, which are glued and fitted in one at a time. I'm going to clamp this into position overnight, and then the next day, once the clamp is removed, I'm going to make these little ebony pieces to fit in the little football shapes that run around the outside perimeter. Once those are glued in place, I'm going to cut a little thin groove around the outer edge where I'm gluing in a little piece of poly line. Here's the completed door. It's repaired. Now the lid, that red stain that was in there, I'm going to try to bleach it out. The first thing I'm going to do is use a regular bleach, Clorox bleach. Going over it now, I'm starting to notice that it's really not cutting in at all, so I'm going to switch over to a stronger bleach, which is this. It's a two-part bleach. It's called A and B bleach. You mix equal parts and you rub it on, a chemical reaction, and you can see before your eyes the red is just coming out. Once the bleaching is done, you have to neutralize the wood with a vinegar, which will kill the bleaching agent. If you don't do that, it'll keep bleaching on and on and on. This is shellac. It's an amber finish. This is what the desk was refinished with originally. And I'm going to cut it back about 1 to 4 in parts. And I'm going to give the desk in all parts 2 light coats completely. The first few coats penetrate into the wood, and you let them dry thoroughly. And you want to keep the first few coats very thin so that it penetrates into the wood. The alcohol will seep into it. This lid is now dry from the bleaching and neutralizing it, and I'm wiping it down with a clear denatured alcohol for 2 reasons. One, to see the color, to determine what stain I need, and also when I stain it, I won't leave tracks from where I've stained it because the alcohol will help seep it all together. Sometimes if you stain a board, you can see the traces where you've wiped it on, a little ghost image. But wetting it with alcohol first will dissipate it and keep the color all even. The rest of the parts of the desk, the color, natural color is beautiful. I'm not going to add anything to it right now at all. This is the natural color of the cherry wood, which we saved from not over sanding the wood after it was stripped. Okay, after a light sandpapering, 2 more coats of shellac are added. When the shellac is nice and dry overnight, a light scuffing with a 220 sandpaper is given to smooth off all the rough edges and create a nice smooth surface. I'm now going to rub it with a fine steel wool, a 4-0 steel wool with a little pressure, and rub it completely as flat as I can to give a nice smooth pressed look. Removing all the dust, and 2 more light coats of shellac are added on top of that. Now that the shellac has dried, we have about a half a dozen coats. You can see a beautiful, filled, cleared look of the grain is nice and clear. The color has a nice yellow emanating through the bottom, starting to get some depth in it. So I'm now going to steel wool flat the entire desk all over again, and we have to give it a look over to see if there's any touch up, and we want to prepare for a little French polishing. So I want to attach the lid to the body, and the first thing I'm going to do is steel wool these hinges, clean them up, and I'm going to attach the lid right to the body of the desk. These are the lid supports. They slide in from underneath the lid to hold the lid from falling down when you open it. The round little pegs in the picture here, these are the stops which are added after the supports are slid into the body. It prevents the pull-out from coming out too far. Okay, the lid is attached, the supports are underneath them. The case is all steel wool down, and this is a French polish mixture I made. I don't want to change the color of the desk by adding any more amber, which the shellac is, so I'm going to French polish this desk with a clear lacquer. It's nitrocellulose based lacquer. You can use a clear shellac if you want. I prefer to use a few light coats of this lacquer. And during this process, the lacquer is applied coming off this rag, and I'm putting a light streak on from side to side, and I'm skipping a couple inches in between padding. See me skipping a couple inches right there. I'm now going to start from the beginning and hit all the parts that I missed. Now I'm going to go over, these are my touch-up powders. I take a combination of the colors mixed with a little lacquer to create the color that I need for touch-up. We need a little color around the edges here. These seams, there were some cracks. A little filler was used. Big chip on the bottom. It's a piece of wood we cut in there before. I'm going to start by touching up the cherry wedges that I hammered in the side. Put a little color on top of them. Try to grain it in at the same time to make it look like a grain to disguise it. I'm doing on the bottom. I'm touching this up and I'm turning them into grains. This was the chip that was on the side of the draw. I'm now adding the grain in around to go around the edges of the chip to make it look like it naturally goes into the draw. These front boards, the draw dividers, were a little too light, so I'm adding a transparent color to darken them a little bit. I'm French polishing the desk once again, over and over again until it builds up a luster. It also, the benefit of French polishing is it hides that sprayed on look, so it doesn't look like it's just been out of a spray can. It gives it a hand done type of a look. It fills up the little pores in the wood and some imperfections, and it's going to give you a depth in the finish after we rub it and wax it that you can't get by only adding a spray to it. Okay, here we have the desk after it has been French polished. All the parts are ready to go. What we have to do now is give another rubbing completely with the fine steel wool. I like to use a paste wax next. I like Johnson's paste wax. I rub it on, buff it off, and it not only feels smooth from rubbing it with steel wool, but after you wax it and buff it up, it has a very nice soft feel to it, and it has a nice mellow glow to it. It's sort of a semi-luster, and the color is clear. What we do now is to assemble the pigeonhole area. We're going to put in our vertical then horizontal boards. Now we have to attach the back boards. Now inside the center, there's a hidden drawer that goes in first. There it is on the bottom. Now we put in 3 center drawers on top of each other. To the left and the right of the center drawers are these ribbed, narrow drawers. The remaining pigeonhole drawers are inserted. And we have a complete, restored drop lid desk.